It's not often you get to make history, but we've just solved one of the great Australian mystery stories. More than 60 years ago, 3 Japanese midget subs made a daring wartime raid on Sydney. 2 were captured, but the 3rd disappeared, seemingly forever. Over the years, there's been many a false start, many a hoax, many a diver claiming to have found the missing sub. But now it's finally been discovered by a bunch of knockabout scuba divers who took me along on their great adventure. What you're about to see is an extraordinary story. A story of plenty of luck and lots of daring. A great chapter in our history unfolding just a few kilometres off Sydney's northern beaches. It's a beautiful morning to be a part of history. Mist over the hills and the sun making its striking appearance over the ocean. We're steaming to an anonymous dot off Sydney to rendezvous with 7 knockabout blokes. On cue, they arrive.
They're just looking for the mooring buoy we put on it yesterday.
You couldn't get better mates. A builder, electrician, bus driver, retired painter. There's nothing fancy about these fellows. In fact, they proudly called their group No Frills Divers.
Are you ready for us to go in?
Yep.
It's pretty amazing, isn't it, to think that we're on top of the wreck right now.
Certainly is. Absolutely incredible, isn't it? They've been looking for what, 60 years or something?
Solve the mystery.
Our exact location is a secret, but we're not that far offshore.
Okay, 1, 2, 3.
And below us is what we think is the answer to one of Australia's greatest World War II mysteries. By normal scuba standards, this is a deep and risky dive. But for these men, the prize that's revealed makes the danger worthwhile. And there she is. At first, in the murky water, it doesn't look like much. But soon, you notice the propellers at the stern. And then, hidden behind the schools of fish, the unmistakable form of the conning tower. This is Japanese midget submarine M24, missing in action for 64 years. And these 7 mates discovered it.
We just saw this long shape with a little lump sticking out of it, and the heart, started going, and you think, nah, it couldn't be.
You can actually talk underwater.
Yeah.
And I yelled at tone.
Yep.
Particularly when we saw the props at the back.
That's
Sub,
right.
sub, sub.
Yeah.
These diving fanatics take the plunge every weekend, forever on the lookout for uncharted wrecks. But stumbling across this submarine was an ambition even they thought was too lofty to seriously contemplate.
I have been dreaming of finding this wreck for 25 years of diving. Finally, it's a realisation. I still can't believe it.
Few civilians believed the war could come this far south. Just how wrong they were on the night of May 31st, 1942.
It was the night World War II came to a very unsuspecting Sydney. The Japanese attacked with 3 midget submarines.
Those people living near the coast will not forget the invasion, not for the rest of their lives.
The target was supposed to be the American battlecruiser USS Chicago, moored in the harbour. 2 of the midgets, the M22 and the M27, were discovered and disabled before they could do any damage. But the 3rd, the M24, evaded our defences and fired its 2 torpedoes. It was a truly audacious strike. Sydney was completely unprepared, Our best defence was probably luck. The USS Chicago, with 1,100 sailors on board, was moored just over there. The M24 had her in its sights from around about here. One of its torpedoes, thankfully, fizzled. It ran aground and failed to detonate. But the other just missed the Chicago and a Dutch submarine and hit the seawall at Garden Island, exploding underneath the HMAS Cuttable. It was that blast that killed 19 Australian and 2 British sailors.
Here in Sydney was the ferry Cuttable, which was serving as portion of a naval base.
I honestly thought at that time that everybody was dead, because it was really horrendous, the noise and the violence, and the waves just raced up the stairs and I got caught there. So I took a punt and a deep breath, and I knew where the exit was, so I swam underwater.
64 years ago, seaman Neil Roberts was 18. Minutes before the attack, he'd finished his watch. But instead of going to his own hammock on a lower deck of the Cuttable, he borrowed a mate's higher up. If you hadn't had that hammock on the top floor,
I'd have died. I'm convinced of that, because where I actually slept was where the bulk of them died. Another friend of mine was nearby there, and he was blown up through the roof.
In the mayhem of that night, the Chicago and other ships spotted and fired on the Japanese sub, but still it managed to escape. At 1:58 early the next morning, it was detected leaving the harbour and heading straight out to sea. Where it went from that moment, nobody knew. It disappeared without a trace, until now. How'd you go?
Fantastically.
What's it look like?
Unbelievable.
Since discovering the sub, these no-frill divers have been back to visit about half a dozen times.
You boys did it! Unbelievable! Like nothing else.
And while none of them are trained marine archaeologists, properly authenticating their find is important.
I think we've been told that there were 40 different excursions of people that have said they've found it. Well, they haven't. And they didn't. We did. And that's just big.
They had 2 torpedo tubes. They fired 2 torpedoes. Yeah, obviously they're empty.
Oh, you wait.
Each of the dives has been photographed and then eagerly viewed over and over again by the team.
Now look at this.
This is when he's starting to yell at me.
That's the conning tower.
These could well be some of the most important home videos in our country's history.
That's the torpedo tube that delivered the torpedo that killed 19 Australians and 2 British. That's correct. Do you get a sense of history when you're looking at this downstairs?
Yeah.
You realise what's gone on, and you sort of think, well, shit, this is it. This is what did it, and here we are. And then you wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and you think, shit again. It's just here we are. Yeah.
It's one of the things I'd be looking for is battle damage. Do you know what these bars are?
For official verification, the men turned to Commander Shane Moore, who's in charge of the Australian Navy's Heritage Collection.
There's no prop guard on it.
No, you can see the rudder guard.
Over the years, the commander's listened to many others with similar claims, all proven false, so he's not quick to make pronouncements.
It looks like it's hit bow first at some speed.
But in the end, the video evidence, combined with the measurements taken by the divers, proves overwhelming.
If it's not the M24, what could it possibly be?
Oh, it can't be anything else.
You're pretty convinced looking at these pictures, are you?
Well, I mean...
Yes.
I'm convinced.
Ask a man a silly question.
So these fellas have just found the 3rd one?
It would appear so, Liam. It would appear so.
It's amazing, isn't it?
It is very amazing.
There is no doubt that that is an A-type midget submarine of the Imperial Japanese Navy, and they only brought 3 to Australian waters according to their own war diaries, and 2 of them were sunk in Sydney Harbour, and The other one went missing from Sydney Harbour, and so it can only be M24.
As a naval historian, did you always expect that this would be found eventually?
Well, you would say so. 79-foot submarines don't necessarily disappear forever, but it's extraordinary that some amateur divers have come up with this remarkable find.
Not many people understand just how significant this will be to the Japanese. It's an honourable thing that you gentlemen have done.
As 7 weekend divers mark their unlikely place in history, spending time with the commander unravels more bits of the puzzle.
We think he might have suffered battle damage, and perhaps one of the reasons why his shots missed from relatively close range was that he had to fire using his own eyesight from the conning tower itself, because his periscope was probably destroyed by gunfire or whatever.
And this could be the evidence to explain what eventually crippled the submarine. On top of the hull, the divers find what looks like bullet holes, possibly fired from the USS Chicago.
They were firing not only large caliber weapons, 5-inch guns for example, but they're also machine guns, 303 machine guns, 20mm guns. So and that hole actually looked like a 20mm.
This submarine is the best of the two halves of the midgets that were captured on that night in 1942, brought together here at the War Memorial in Canberra. In size, it's a little bit longer than a cricket pitch, powered by masses of batteries back here. For the crew, it was cramped beyond belief and almost impossible to manoeuvre. If you were assigned to one of these, it wasn't a suicide mission, but it was close.
They were career officers. They weren't hostilities only or poorly trained. These were elitely trained officers and seamen.
Well, you have to be incredibly brave or silly to get inside one of them, that's for sure.
Well, these days we'd call them special forces.
Yeah, right.
And that's essentially what they were called. They were called the Special Attack Group.
Over the years, I don't hold any grudges against the Japanese, and it was tragic. It was war, and I suppose in a major sense I have a tremendous admiration for these men, because they were locked in, not a very fancy craft, and they died.
On behalf of the No Frills divers and all the divers that found this wreck, we'd like to donate this reef as a mark of respect for the 2 Japanese sailors that died on this submarine.
Amen.
Yes.
The wreck of the M24 is also now a war grave. It's expected the remains of Sub-Lieutenant Katsuisha Ban and Petty Officer Mamoru Ashibi are still on board. Of course, there will be enormous interest in it, and other divers will want to take a look. But a warning, disturbing this site comes with million-dollar fines and jail terms.
If divers and other unscrupulous people find out about this wreck, they will go down on it and they will take things, and it won't be respectful. We want to be respectful, and we would like to see the Japanese government actually raise the wreck, and we would like to take part in helping them do that.
Small group of Australian heroes. Yeah.
Late in the week, a small but significant ceremony. Defence Minister Brendan Nelson was given the secret coordinates of the midget submarine.
It's an extremely important part of our history and our shared history with Japan, and under no circumstances will anybody be able to lawfully go near it, to take anything from it, or indeed to disturb it in any way, shape or form.
These 7 mates are rightly proud of their achievement. But you're guaranteed none of them will be hanging up their flippers just yet. They'll all be out again next weekend, searching for another great treasure.
We found a little bit of history, and I think we've maybe created a little bit for ourselves.
So all those years, all those weekends, and finally this.
Big, isn't it? Yeah. That's huge.
Hello, I'm Tom Steinfort. Thanks for watching 60 Minutes Australia. Subscribe to our channel now for brand new stories and exclusive clips every week. And don't miss out on our Extra Minutes segments and full episodes of 60 Minutes on 9now.com.au, as well as the 9Now app.